Buenos días. Ya casi vamos a empezar. María Fernanda, no sé si podríamos hacer un test muy rápido de tu micrófono y tu video, por favor.
Claro que sí, hola, buenos días a todos. Es un gusto saludarlos.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días. Todo bien de nuestro lado con el test técnico. Gracias.
Buenos días, María Fernanda. Welcome. Welcome to everyone.
Gracias, Carlos.
Encantado.
Tenemos un par de panelistas que están tratando de conectarse en este momento, Carlos, para que sepas.
Perfecto, gracias.
Bom dia a todos.
Bom dia, Anderson. Muito obrigada. Puder testar o seu vídeo também?
Posso compartilhar aqui rapidinho, então?
Sim, se puder ativar.
Agora sim.
Ótimo, muito obrigada. A gente vai empezar muito em breve.
Oi, Anderson, bem-vindo. Obrigado por estar conosco.
Bom dia. Foi o Carlos que falou, né? Bom dia, Carlos.
Sim, sou eu, o moderador da sessão. Vamos começar daqui a pouco, não, Libe?
Sim, eu acho que podemos começar daqui a um minuto.
Perfeito.
Vamos começar o webinário agora, deixar os participantes entrarem. Vamos a empezar el webinario y dejar a las personas entrar.
Hi, everyone. I think we will start the webinar now, the workshop. People will join little by little, but we have time constraints. And I'd like to thank all the speakers who joined online. If you are lost in translation, let me tell you that you have 3 channels for English, Portuguese, and Spanish. To access the channel, you need click on the interpretation button that you find at the bottom of your screen. To tell you also that we will indicate in the chat the reference to the publications or programs presented by the speakers. Have a look at the chat during the presentations. Also, there will be an executive summary of the webinar that will include all the presentations that the speakers will present today. It will be published in the coming weeks, so stay focused on the speakers because you will have access to the documents. So listen to them and prepare some questions for the Q&A at the end of the webinar. Last but not least, if you have questions or comments or remarks, please send them via the Q&A button on the toolbar below your screen. Thank you. So if you are lost in the web and you just arrived here and don't know what for, you are here for the webinar on aligning SDBs with global agendas, ongoing experiences with norms, standards, procedures in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is a webinar that is organized by the Alliance of Subnational Development Banks from Latin America and Caribbean. We are very pleased to welcome you. This is the first 2023 activity of the webinar. Before I get maybe in a more precise presentation and quick presentation of the Alliance itself, I have to share some sad news with you today regarding one of our speaking institutions. It is with regret that we inform you that the team of the Mato Grosso Development Bank is going through a period of loss and pain. On April 15, the CEO, Sir Jair de Oliveira Marques, passed away. He was an enthusiastic defender of entrepreneurship, networking, and alliances with other stakeholders, and a great supporter of the Alliance's work. He will be missed, and we will give you more information, but Mato Grosso Development Bank will not be amongst us today. Bruna Araujo from ABD will be making the presentation alone. Just to give you some information on the SDBs Alliance in Latin America and the Caribbean, it was launched in 2021 under the Finance in Common umbrella, which is the global network gathering more than 500 public development banks around the world. Subnational development banks, SDBs, are defined as public development banks or financial institutions with a specific mandate to finance subnational investments. The Alliance aims to strengthen the capacities of these SDBs to improve their interventions in support of sustainable urban and territorial transitions in Latin America and the Caribbean. It is the Alliance as such is a strategic space for dialogue and partnerships with peers, financial and technical partners, national, regional, local governments and experts. The idea is to align the SDB strategies, standards, initiatives, portfolios with the 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement on climate, to diversify SDB's technical and financial services offered to local and regional governments and local players, meaning SMEs especially, and to promote sustainable investments in the portfolios for urban and territorial development projects and to boost the financial, urban, and municipal market. You have all the details on the Alliance on FMDV's website. FMDV is the Secretariat of the Alliance. We have a membership composed of a very diverse array of players, from MDBs, multilateral development banks, to national development banks and subnational development banks. We have think tanks, we have UN agencies, we have networks of local and regional governments, and we are all a very well-functioning and working group in solidarity, and we hope that we will be able to deliver more changes in the coming month, especially because, and I will stop there, because this year the Finance in Common Summit will be organized in Cartagena, in Colombia, in September, 4, 5, 6 of September. It will be a very important moment for mobilizing the stakeholders of Latin America, obviously, and around the world, but mainly Latin American players. So stay tuned to more news on the Alliance's sessions there, especially the annual forum of the Alliance. Without further ado, let me just very quickly, you have all read the concept note, obviously, if not you wouldn't be here. So I will not go back to the principles guiding our discussion. Just to state that we have listed in the concept note a few challenges and opportunities for some national development banks regarding the topic, aligning their portfolio on the 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement principles. The speakers will be distributed with 3 levels of interventions. First, we will have a keynote speaker with Marie Garcin, IDFC Partnership Officer, IDFC International Development Finance Club. She will be presenting an overview of the alignment of norms, standards, and procedures with global agendas based on IDFC's study, PDB's catalytic role in achieving the UN SDGs, and with a specific focus on its section, Draw Me an Aligned PDB. You will have then a first set of presentations on the experience of MDBs, multilateral development banks, internally, on how they have been aligning their own processes and how they have this have influenced and changed the relations with their clients and partners like SDBs. We will have Sir Edgar Salinas, Executive Principal on Climate Change in the Climate Change Unit of CAF, and Mr. Rafael Ranieri, Jefe de la Unidad de Efectividad en el Desarrollo and Fond Plata. Then we will have a section on knowledge and technical transfers, especially coming from BEAD with Gianleo Frisari, Senior Sustainable Finance Specialist, and with Ms. Nergis Goulassan, who is the Regional SDG Finance Specialist for the LAC region at UNDP Sustainable Finance Hub. They will be discussing the most relevant projects and programs they have in the region on knowledge sharing and technical transfer to SDBs especially. And we will have a section on the strategic alignment and internal mainstreaming within the SDBs with Bruna Araujo, who is the manager for sustainability and economy in the Brazilian Association for Development, ABDE. She will be presenting the experience with the Mato Grosso Development Bank, Development Bank, and Miss Maria Fernanda Manrique, who is lead in sustainable development at Bancoldex. Bancoldex, who will be the key host together with BEAD, AFD as Secretariat of FIX, and I'm forgetting one, BEAD, Bancoldex, Secretariat of FIX for the Financing Commons Summit, and ALIDE, yes, together with the support of CAF and EIB. So she will be presenting on Bancoldex side what has been happening in Colombia, and especially in her program on Sustainably Adelante for SMEs. And then we will finish with two speakers on coming from the SDB side in Brazil, from Mr. Anderson José Amâncio, head of the Directorate Office in BRDE, Banco Regional de Desenvolvimento do Extremo Sul, and Cynthia Bechlein, Planning Superintendence Manager in the Banco de Desenvolvimento do Minas Gerais, BDMG, two very well-known SDBs in Brazil. Then it will be the moment for Q&As. If okay with you, Marie, are you ready to take the floor?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Carlos.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good day to all of you. I'm very pleased to be with you today and to participate in this webinar. So my name is Marie Garcin. I'm working for the Secretariat of IDFC. For those who don't know the club, I will introduce very briefly IDFC. If we can go to the next slide, please. So IDFC is a global network of 26 national, regional, and development banks from all over the world. The club has been created in 2011, and the mission of the club is really to work together to implement the SDGs as well as the Paris Climate Agreement agenda. We have 4 main objectives. First one is about knowledge sharing and capacity building. The second one is an advocacy role. Third one is really to increase the cooperation between members and to facilitate their access to project preparation and project financing. And the last objective is to foster the cooperation with partners. IDFC is working with the Green Climate Fund, with MTI, with MDBs, etc. All activities are organized through 5 working groups. We have 4 working groups that are thematic ones: climate finance, biodiversity, gender equality, SDG alignment, and we have also a transversal working group called Cooperation for Development. In 2019, IDFC created a climate facility, which is a technical assistance facility to support the climate activities of the club. And on the slide, you also have some key data of the club. So altogether, IDFC members represent more than $4 trillion USD of assets. This is about 800 billion USD financing per year. And among these 800, in 2021, 224 was climate finance. And 15 members of the club are accredited to the Green Climate Fund. In terms of activities on SDG alignment, we can go to the next slide, please. Oh, here you have a map of the IDFC members. So as you have seen, we are all over the world. In terms of work on SDG alignment, it started in 2018. Actually, climate is a historical and a strong marker of the club, but in 2018, the club decided to adopt a broader agenda. And that's why in 2018, we are partnered with the Center for Global Development to issue a report on the key success factors and challenges in implementing SDGs for the public development banks. It was followed by a survey on members' approaches to characterize SDG compatibility of activities and investments. And then in 2020, we decided to go a step further, creating 5 sub-working groups on PDB's mandate, on the regulation topic, on business models of the public development banks, on SDG framework, and the last sub-working group was on international development finance architecture. And basically, 2 main conclusions came out from this work. One, there is a need to define what it means to be aligned with the SDGs for a public development bank. And second, there is a need for practical and harmonized tools to characterize which investments are aligned with the SDGs and which are not. And all the outputs of this work were consolidated in a publication issued at the Finance in Commons Summit first edition in 2020. And then it explained also why we launched the study in 2021 in order to provide IDFT members with a conceptual common framework on SDG alignment, as well as some tools to implement this framework. So the study has been carried out by Natixis, the Green and Sustainable Hub of Natixis. And for the methodology, they did a stock-taking exercise, obviously, of existing framework, existing tools. They did also an stock-taking exercise of IDFT members' practices. They conducted also some interviews with other stakeholders of the ecosystem. And we organized also a workshop last year in September with some IDFT members to test the tool and the concept developed in the study. The study has been published last year, and we organized in February this year a launching webinar to present the main output of the study, and also we had the opportunity to invite some other stakeholders, private investor, impact evaluation experts, and MDB. So if we want to talk a little bit more about the study, what we can find in this report, basically there are 3 main tools that have been tested by IDFT members. First, integration trackers. There are 15 integration trackers at the entity level and at the activity level. And the idea is really to measure and to follow the alignment degree of the public development bank. As it is a self-assessment tool, there is also an evaluation grid to allow the bank to do this self-assessment exercise, to rank the institution on a scale between 0 to 5 on every topic presented here. Second tool is a diagnosis canvas. It's called SAAU for Stop, Adjust, Amplify, and Undertake. This diagnosis canvas is really action-oriented, and the objective of the tool is to make a diagnosis, but it can be done at a business unit level, it can be done at a strategic level, etc. Third tool is a capital allocation tool called SART for SDG Adjusted Return Tool. And this tool enables a project positioning and comparison according to both profitability and impact. So basically, you have first to define or to define a sustainability impact coefficient to the project. So using science-based, using your internal taxonomy, and then you use this sustainability impact coefficient to adjust the return of the project. We worked also on this study on few topics. The topic of anchoring the strategy of the institution into the national roadmap. We worked also on SDG taxonomy and on the reporting question and accountability framework. And last but not least, there is a specific part in the study called Draw Me an Aligned PDB. And this part is interesting because it's a fictive case study actually to understand how you can put into practice all recommendation, tools, and concepts developed in the study. So we can go to the next slide. So as I was mentioning, so it is a fictive case study. So we are following the journey of the bank, Robinson Bank. This is a national development bank based in Latin America and created in 1988. The mandate of the bank is to support trade and export. The bank has a sustainability department in charge of the ENS topics since 2009, but and in 2021, sorry, the bank joined the club IDFT. And then I split here the journey of this bank into three main phases. So the first one is the diagnosis phase, then there is the implementation phase, and finally the accountability phase and the external commitment phase. So first step is a diagnosis phase. So the bank decided to create a sustainable finance working group within the bank. And this working group decided to define a methodology to incorporate the 2030 agenda roadmap and the NDC of the country into its strategic plan. And then there was a decision from the top management to really start working on maximizing the contribution to the country's objective. And then it led to the revision of the strategy of the bank. Second phase, implementation, it's really bring the SDGs into the bank. So it started with a new framework developed with the help, the support of a consultant. So new framework focusing on the 2030 agenda. The bank also reshuffled the organigram in order to enlarge the scope of responsibility of the sustainability team that will be in charge of the implementation and monitoring of the SDGs. There is also some changes in human resources practices in terms of training, in terms of career process. The bank did also a review of the portfolio, and then they used the tool that I presented earlier, the SAAU. They decided also to launch a pilot phase to test the capital allocation tool, the SART. So for this tool, they had to develop an internal taxonomy and decided to develop this taxonomy on 3 pilot sectors, transport, telecommunication, and energy. And little by little, the bank uses this tool to really orient investment decisions. Obviously, this journey was not that easy, and the bank faced some challenges to develop this new strategy and new tool within the bank. The challenges of data, for example, so they had to adopt a specific tool to improve the data collection. The challenges also of having right indicators to measure the potential SDG contribution of a given project. So in the same way, they adopted also a specific tool to support them in this process. The last phase is the accountability reporting phase. So the bank was able to disclose the progress made with some KPIs. These KPIs are linked to the integration trackers that has been used at the beginning to make the diagnosis. The bank is also able to disclose the sustainability impact coefficient of the portfolio. And then based on this monitoring of the sustainability impact coefficient, the bank commits to some targets and commit to improve this impact on the portfolio. Next slide, please. So what next for IDFT now? Because we have some materials now that we can build on, and we would like to go a step further now. That's why we are working on a position paper as a contribution to the 2023 UN Summit on SDGs. So this position paper is really to show concrete element of implementation of SDG alignment by public development banks, and it is based on the study, but not only on the study, it's also based on the previous position of previous work done by the club. So we developed 5 items for this paper. This is a work that is currently ongoing, so it's not finalized, but we would like to present some of them here. So first item is really the guidepost for alignment, referring to Article 2.1 C of Paris Agreement, and also Objective D of the Montreal and Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework, is really to make the financial system consistent with the SDG. And then second item is the alignment at entity level. So we are thinking here about the internal transformation of the institution, about the strategy, on the culture of the institution, but also on the funding plan, the risk management of the bank. Then a third item is an alignment at operational level. So with 2 topics here. One is to ensure the geographic contextualization of the activities, and 2, to assess really the ex-ante SDG impact, to be able to guide decisions, and then to monitor this impact of the portfolio. Fourth item is the alignment at external level. So we are talking here about the stakeholder mobilization, so government mobilization in terms of mandate, mobilization also to enable PDBs to have more capital base, financial capabilities, and mobilization also for the setup, implementation of common guidelines, methodology across the financial system. And the last item is about reporting and accountability, of course. So basically, this is what we would like to, we wanted to present you today, and we invite all of you to discuss with us and to find common position on this important and key element of implementation of the SDG for the public development bank. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. It was 15 minutes tops. Thank you so much. You have a lot of members within the panelists, so I guess we will have some echoes of this presentation and logic from the integration to diagnosis, reallocation of capital, and engaging with the partners and the whole financing value chain, because that's about influence and impact. I'd like to give the floor now to CAF and Fomplata. CAF, Edgar Salinas, please, could you step in and let us know in 5 minutes, remember? 5 minutes, I'm having my eye on you, on CAF's experience in that integration, especially on green financing. Thank you.
Gracias, Carlos. También gracias a la Secretaría, a los miembros de la Alianza por la invitación. Muy complacido de compartir el foro hoy con parceiros de longa data, Fomplata, Rafael, Marie, saludos, colegas en Brasil con quien tenemos relaciones comerciales, BRDE, BMDG.
With the countries that we have commercial relations with, the BDMG, and we might be able to inform you of an event in the next week, and the Bank Caldex, the colleagues from Colombia. So the first thing I'd like to share with you is that we have some global agendas from the corporate level, and it's important to understand that the team ahead of that has to understand the composition of the bank, what was the bank created for, and because we know that we are in a development bank communities, right? And although this is the commonality, some of them have very special niches to act, the productive development, specific strategies for urban infrastructure. So this was the CAF was a bank that was created over 50 years ago in order to promote sustainable development. And this is pretty much entrenched into our DNA. And we have been creating our own partner alignments and after the creation of some of our main working strategies. And the next one, please. So we basically report the green funding mapping, and we do obviously have to be accountable for each one of those funding initiatives. And the green funding is one ways of implementing. And this could be very similar to specific genders, agriculture, and this is what we report through the IDFC green funding diversities. And for that, we need to develop some internal guides, and this is an internal tool of how those international guidelines can be used in order to share specific information. And here we can see the system development. So underlining all that, we have the both from the quarterly as well as for the yearly perspectives. And here we have the business model. And we know that this is a very interesting metrics, the SDGs and the green funding. This is considered whenever specific funding is being asked for. And so when we have also the system for corporate results and to keep on the dialogue with clients. And this is, so we have this financial offer, which is either dedicated to gender, diversity, or climate change. And so this is something that we have to keep an eye on. Thank you. And some concrete examples of green funding operations. So the CAF, this is what we have been working at a second level, and the commercial banks and the implementation of this climate change agenda, gender, institutional development. As I said, we have a program that has been formalized in 2022, July more specifically, and we are just waiting for the disbursements to be executed throughout the coming year, 23 and 24 as well. And this is going to be geared towards sustainable agriculture, energy efficiency, renewables in Peru, Chile, Ecuador, and Panama. This is what basically gives us a technical cooperation package. And here we can basically illustrate how the CAF and GCF joint alliance works. And we can see here that we basically try to cover the PYMEs, and in the first level, the other basic initiatives. And we have here a couple of examples within our portfolio. So we have among those many others, but I believe that obviously we have some safeguards for both the environment and the social aspects, and we want to just make sure that the CAF agenda can be implemented with all those partners. And we know that in many of those banks, we already have some green portfolio. And we just basically, those of you who will check this presentation later in more details, you have the chance to see. But this is what we have to share, and we would like to finish with some recommendations. Number one, defining targets for climate funding by diversity, gender. It's very, very important for us to understand what are the strategies and to try to decrease the impact, because obviously SDGs and alignments, we have to understand what are the effects that have been promised, and to maintain this technical dialogue with the experts for the sectors of interest. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Perfect. 5 minutes. Just one quick question. Do you know how long was necessary for the integration of this whole alliance within the CAF in order for you to organize this offer? Well, I think that this is, I wish I could tell you that it's a very easy process. However, the green funding process has been a rather transforming process, and we have been just reporting green funding since 2011. And obviously, since then to now, we have improved considerably. And we obviously have strengthened a lot our system since 2015 after a couple of internal changes. So obviously, I would say at least 3 years minimum for this to start being incorporated in the business areas and into the operating DNA of the organization. Thank you. Thank you so very much for your intervention, Edgar. Now I would like to just give the floor to Mr. Rafael Ranieri from Fon Plata. And how did that take place at Fon Plata, Rafael? And what was in parallel with what was done here?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and share the Fon Plata experience and also learn about new other experience that certainly help us move forward in the alignment process. Well, what we see with the Fon Plata experience is that alignment is associated with a number of different areas in the institution, not necessarily at the same time, not necessarily at the specific order, and not necessarily with a coordination by all areas. After a certain point, we will advance and move forward in a more cohesive way. Now, that being said, at Fon Plata, in the strategic level, upper level, the mission that was established by the bank's current institutional plan focuses especially on inclusive and sustainable development. And this leads to a strategic alignment, let's say, with the global agendas. Now, that being said, how can we translate that into effective results? One of the key elements to do so is to update, review, or develop new policies, strategies, and plans that reflect this strategic focus, so to speak. This happens at different moments. Some have been finalized, some of these processes are still ongoing. So we have instruments that translate this strategic focus. In Fon Plata, we were pioneers in adopting a sustainable approach and a clear commitment with sustainability. So Fon Plata does have the instruments focused on sustainability. We have a lean grind, and we have clear alignment with SDGs and specific indicators for that too. Other instruments we have are green and gender-based financing lines. So we can focus on these themes to bring about incentive in terms of interest rates in projects that are related to these areas. You also have to mention that to see in practice what we see in paper on the institutions' guidelines, we need the adequate instruments and methodologies so that we can make this strategic focus possible. For us, a key element is still being developed developed. We have been doing so for a few years, but we do have a project information system that allows us to have clearer information on project cycles, elements, and that includes this includes SDG alignment. And we have a company that has been commissioned to develop this. So we have finances to Fomplata that is received by Fomplata, and this funding is transferred to local institutions, helping move forward in alignment with global agendas. Another example was a partnership done with Fomplata to develop the sustainable milestones for the institution. And the next slide here, we see that today it is possible for us to have a clear oversight of our SDG portfolio. So we know what we are contributing more towards. So in Fomplata, for example, you have sustainable cities as our top one here in the portfolio, and also sustainable system following that. This shows our progress. And we can see these indicators now. Right now, we are moving towards a process to improve continuously, and therefore we are currently revising and updating the methodology focused on SDG alignment to see primary and secondary contribution of our projects towards SDG. So we do focus on some specific SDGs, and that would be the primary contribution, but we can also identify the secondary ones. And this is a part of our everlasting improvement process. More and more, we try to harmonize, so to speak, what has been developed already and move forward in a cohesive way. So an example of something that is ongoing is a gender strategy that is being developed with clear indicators for that. And also another example are methodologies to identify components that would make a project green or gender focused. Another methodology that is also being developed is the identification of a methodology to identify association with SDGs and to see the primary and secondary contributions. We're also developing a result monitoring milestone tool so that we know the milestones that represent the institution, and we can see what the institution is doing with the work of Fomplata. At the same time, you're able to see a perspective of self-management of that institution and how they're working to be a role model of whatever they're trying to target in their projects. So these are but a few of the initiatives that keep moving forward. But the main idea here is that more and more the institution wants to be contributing towards SDGs. Thank you, Rafael. I do have a quick question though. In your opinion, what's the biggest challenge Fomplata currently faces to implement the strategy and to move forward? What's your current main challenge? Well, I believe once we have gone with the process in different levels, but things happen simultaneously, but not necessarily in a cohesive way. So the biggest challenge now is to synchronize and harmonize all of the initiatives that have been concluded, the ongoing ones, so that we can really have true alignment in the institution. Thank you very much. This slide shows your contacts, and the presentation is going to be sent to participants. If you have questions, we will have a moment for Q&A, but
I'd like to give the floor. We just witnessed how much technical assistance is important, and that the processes for alignment are time-consuming. And BEAD and UNDP have been key partners in the region to help accelerate this integration. So let me give the floor to Gianleo Flisari, Senior Sustainable Finance Specialist at BEAD. Gianleo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Estaba pensando en hablar español porque las slides están en español. Imagino que está bien.
I was considering speaking Spanish, so because the slides were in Spanish, so it's all right. Whatever you prefer. Now, I'm really pleased with this, 3-idiom webinar. Thank you so very much for the invitation. Thank you for the Alliance members. So there's so much to talk about, and yeah, we've been one of the parties and partners here in this transition. As you know well, the IDB, or the BID as a multilateral development institution, is quite committed to the Paris alignment. And this has been so for quite a while. And since this year, we've started to, well, actually last year, we have already worked with many other multilateral institutions for the joint alignment, and now we are implementing it. And a dedicated part of this methodology that has required a lot of work is precisely the alignment of all the intermediate financing funds, and this is important not only for what we do, but at the same time, because we are dealing with the mid and long-term projects. So we need to assess and to visualize the counterparts, the national and subnational development banks, and so in such a way, and we have here the CMF, the Finance and Market, the IFD, and the CMF, as you can see, and part of them are here in the audience. We have developed this technical support team for the development bank. So what we will see along the next minutes is just a couple of tools. Of course, we have more and more of them are still being developed. This is a work in progress. Some developments are still underway, but those are rather practical and pragmatic tools. And what we have been doing here in our counterpart and the funding operations that we are involved with. And our intention is to basically help with the alignment. And the alignment has 4 fundamental cornerstones. The first one is with regards to the knowledge and the development of the baseline. In order to start with the internal dialogue and the internal diagnosis, and to understand where each bank is and what type of activity can be glimpsed throughout the next years. The second is really the generation and the creation of portfolios that are indeed aligned with the Paris Agreement. In other words, that are capable of harnessing the green funding opportunities and that are climatically aligned, and at the same time that are able to identify not only the climate, but also social and environmental risks that obviously will avoid non-resilient assets and other assets which are not safe for the bank. And also have to be attentive to the regulatory framework. And the third pillar is comprised of the metrics and the advertisement, not only impact metrics, but also follow-up metrics that are aligned to the best international standards, as we have been witnessing for many years. We have been working with this, and this is now obviously evolving into the national standard boards. And now, as I was mentioning with some of the colleagues who've preceded me, we have to understand the impact measurement of the SDGs vis-a-vis to the Paris Agreement. So we have to understand how banks are going to have an impact on all sustainable development, how it's going to happen after that. And we have to allow a communication with the clients of this alignment with Garrett's. And we think that the greatest added value of this transition is precisely the ability of those banks to have access to funding sources that are committed to climate change, committed to the sustainability principles that at this point in time are not exactly easy, right? And so, as the colleague said, the funds, the reference bonds, and or milestones, and we have the impact investments, right, that are getting closer and closer. So we are going to speak of three tools in particular. And the first is about the self-diagnosis, the self-green and climate change self-diagnosis. That basically identifies this baseline, and we usually do it as a questionnaire. And this is just one of the ways that we devised in order to start up this dialogue. And it can be either green or climate, and it can be gender as well. But we have here the preparation phase, and each bank will basically develop the 5 competences: the strategic management, risk management, product development, financial planning, and metrics management. And so we have organized this with 9 banks, and a couple of others are slowly streaming in and coming in to take part. And we are discussing this in one of the first data survey on how the public development banks, regional public development banks are positioned. What are the strengths, the weaknesses, and what is it that we have to do in order to improve this work? So each bank that fills out the questionnaire will get a personalized, a customized report from BID. And we will start with the dialogue and the advisory process that will take place right after that. The second tool is what we call climate tagging tool, and that it's in a very easy manner allows us to answer as systematically as possible. Of course, I mean, this is challenging by itself, but how many projects of this portfolio are aligned with the, adaptation, climate mitigation, and so on? And so how much or up to what extent we could consider funding with these sustainable plans, and the assessment of new tools, new instruments, new funding lines. What are the characteristics of those lines that are considered green and aligned with climate change goals? Here we can see our main reference, which is the climate financing methodology of the multilateral development banks, and here for the case of the mitigation with the SDGs and with the common principles. And we are also developing in this tool the ability of those banks to develop its own taxonomy, the green tagging or climate tagging tool. And so we can have some automated tools that will help us to understand what are the adaptation and mitigation mechanisms And we have to check the sectors, the activity sectors. We map the sectors, and for each one of those sectors, we have mapped here a number of new categories that can be considered aligned to climate change. And in those categories, we have mapped 161 projects that are basically considered aligned either to mitigation or adaptation. And so we are doing a mapping based or supported and assisted with the artificial intelligence tools. And with that, we are completing the tagging, right? It's again, visually speaking, is not that keen, but it's a work in progress, and we are trying to work with the information that banks have on their own portfolios. And another easy answer, right? And that if that potentially, if they need, for instance, specific indicators, like if in energy efficiency, for instance, we have to know how much energy spending or how much in terms of energy sparing was accomplished. And so we have here the different taxonomies which are possible, and with that we'll obviously offer the ability for the banks to comply with their offers. Sorry, 3 minutes. Okay, the last tool is the risk mapping tool or the risk management tool, and the objective is to help the bank to identify the typical menaces, the typical threats that are intrinsic to their own portfolio, and to analyze the risks. In other words, to check which one of those menaces are transferred to the financial products, of course, depending on the context and how the magnitude of those risks will behave according to the bank portfolio and with the 2030 and 2050 scenarios. And so this is pretty much aligned with the regulation that is being produced. And how can we connect those risks and threats to investment opportunities? So as you can see here from left to right, this is a pilot that we are about to publish soon, and this is for a case of a bank in Mexico. We are working with another bank in Brazil, with banks in Colombia, and in other countries as well. In this case, nowadays, this is an agricultural funding bank, and it's actually, I would say that the not only to deal with either droughts or floods or hydric stress, if you will, water stress, and we will see how those menaces will be translated into indexes, and we will see how much today's portfolio could be, or what are the vulnerability potentials in the future, and we will see what are the more vulnerable clients, and in order to give them some support to identify the sectors with residing investment, and we connect each threat to each respective sector. And because obviously the sector can be, for instance, corn, and the menace is drought, and we can have not only the loss of the crop or the productivity, the yield. And here we have some other, we call them residing in investments, right? Or resilient investments. And we can use maybe precision agriculture. And sometimes the bank has financial products that they already work with, or if they don't work with yet, we can help them starting. So that basically helps banks to understand what are the investment possibilities that already exist within their own portfolio, and how they can change, in the future. So this is, again, as I said, a work in progress, and we'll keep working. This is my email. Feel free to just keep in touch, and we have emails of other colleagues with whom we've been working with. So just feel completely at ease. This is part of the advisory program that we have, and we'll be more than happy to just keep on talking to the other banks who are clients of this alliance. Thank you, John Leo. Thank you very much. And if you allow me, I think we are going to have a great synergy with Nergis' presentation. Nergis, are you ready? I think I can see you.
Sure.
And you have a specific tool that you have been developing on SDG impact management and finance tracking. So take the floor and explain to us what are you bringing to the table?
Thanks so much, Carlos. Thank you also for the invitation. We are very pleased to be part of this alliance, this platform. For us as last mile experts with local knowledge and capacity to lend in local currency, the subnational development banks have a unique transformative role to play for supporting SDG achievement in the region. And the workshop is very timely. Currently at the UN headquarters, we have the ECOSOC Financing for Development Forum. And in advance of this forum, the UN Secretary General released his SDG stimulus document, a call for action. Also, it was a call for action before the IMF World Bank spring meetings. And one of his calls is actually for strengthening the system of public development banks. Of course, here it includes the MDBs, but also national and subnational development banks, and the importance of aligning their operations fully with the SDGs has been reinforced. So you mentioned our IMM work. Let me first mention the broader work. We have 25 country offices in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we work based on demand from governments, national and subnational, and different partners. We work both on the planning side and on the financing for sustainable development, the SDGs, and the climate agenda. So through our Sustainable Finance Hub, our portfolio includes our support on public finance that is also quite relevant for the SDBs. So for example, we support countries on taxation and budgeting for the SDGs at national and subnational level. We support also sovereign thematic debt instruments and the design of bond frameworks and insurance. We also work on identifying investment opportunity areas and unlocking private capital for the SDGs, support to SMEs, etc. And as part of the broader umbrella, we support governments to design financing strategies for the SDGs under their integrated national financing frameworks. And these frameworks bring together public and private finance and public and private policies and a wide range of stakeholders. So the transformative role of subnational development banks and the alignment of their operations with the global agendas we think should be considered in these frameworks. And we advocate this in all the policy dialogues that we support. So yeah, given the theme of today's workshop, let me focus on our work on SDG impact management and finance tracking, especially on our role in knowledge and technical transfers. We see that the global landscape is rapidly evolving with new policies from voluntary frameworks to more targeted and mandatory regulation. There are different initiatives led by public and private actors, and they're promoting shifts in the financial system. Despite their positive disruptions to the financial system, we see that they are fragmented and not progressing at sufficient speed or scale. So there are challenges that remain to translate good intentions into actual positive net impact on the SDGs. Let me give you an example of ESG issues, environmental, social, and governance reporting and claims. So there are concerns about the integrity of these ESG approaches. Therefore, we need a different, more comprehensive approach that intentionally pursues investments that generate measurable social or environmental impact alongside financial returns. So for us, it's critical to help organizations design a robust impact measurement and management IMM framework that integrates sustainability and impact considerations into their decision making. So as part of this work stream, we provide advisory services and deliver training on SDG impact measurement and management to different organizations. For example, in our region, we are planning a training on IMM for the Brazilian Association of Development Banks, ABDE, in early May, which will involve 30 associated development banks. The focus is on sustainability, IMM, and it will be the first in a series of trainings the ABDE plans to streamline. At UNDP, we also have this SDG Impact Initiative, and we have SDG Impact Standards. They're voluntary internal management standards designed to help businesses and investors, bond issuers, embed sustainability and SDGs into their management systems and decision-making practices. Together with the OECD, we published impact standards for financing sustainable development. So we think this set of standards can provide a framework also for subnational development banks to make financial decisions and manage projects in ways that generate a positive impact on sustainable development and improve the transparency of development results. So just to add to John Leo, together with IDB Invest, we are exploring collaboration to pilot a project for the clients of IDB Invest to use the SDG impact standards to help them achieve their sustainability goals. So this collaboration will include UNDP delivering training on IMM and impact standards. Lastly, I would like to touch upon our work on sustainable finance taxonomies. As you know, taxonomies are being developed in the LAC region at a rapid pace. However, lack of comparability can create hurdles for international capital flows going towards SDG-aligned projects. For this reason, we are collaborating with 6 other institutions, the World Bank Group, CAF, IDB, and UN agencies, UNEP, ECLAC, and FAO, to develop a common framework for sustainable finance taxonomies for Latin America and the Caribbean region. And together we will soon publish this framework, which is a guidance document to serve as a voluntary reference for different actors that plan to develop taxonomies in the region. So let me stop there to stick to 5 minutes. We are very pleased to be part of this alliance and committed to supporting the work plan and activities.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nergis. We know UNDP is key in this knowledge transfer and technical assistance at all levels of action. And we're turning to a new phase in the speakers list, going exactly to the local levels of action, with first 2 countries, Brazil and Colombia. Bruna Araujo, muito obrigado por estar com nós hoje.
Thank you once again so very much for being with us, and you're going to present to us the Brazilian Association for the Development, ABDE, and the partnership. So the previous speakers have been developing a specific methodology that might be helpful to the Brazilian bank. So please, you can enjoy a few 10 minutes. And once again, thank you so very, very much for delivering this presentation on behalf of the Mato Grosso Development Bank in face of their absence, unexpected absence. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So let me just thank you all on behalf of the ABDE, the IDFC Alliance for FMDP, and the IDFC Alliance for being here with us. The Mato Grosso colleagues couldn't be here with us, but I'll try to give you some of the practical developments and of the that are so important for the financial institutions. So just to put you up to speed before talking about the project itself, this relationship between the ABDE and its members has started a couple of years ago. We understand that those development institutions, they have a very important role to play, and especially in fostering and funding the credit market and the potential that those institutions have to mobilize funding, to mobilize capital for sustainable projects, for sustainable funding. So, and as we understand our role here in this agenda, IBD has been for many years harnessing this partnership with institutions and with other partners, other members, so that we can move forward in this agenda and to improve the capacity building connected to this SDGs, so that those agendas have more musculature here in Brazil, so that we can contribute even further. I'm not sure whether Gabi, is that you? Okay, next slide. So, considering this logic and the search for partners, let me talk to you a little bit about one project specifically, which is called SDG or Projeto ODS in Portuguese, SDG project that were developed together with the Cooperation Alliance. And so we are basically going to see that there are 4 main goals. And we first tried to map the alignment of the portfolio of the IFDs with regards to the SDGs, and we wanted to integrate the SDGs into the mandates, into the strategies, into the governance of that financial structure to support the adoption of an SDG methodology so that they could work on either their credit portfolios and their programs, and also to foster the engagement with the 2030 agenda and building this internal capability, internal competencies, so that they could increase their institutional ability to incorporate the SDGs and the climate agenda, for instance. So this project was implemented like this. We've developed this methodology and we've validated this methodology with a couple of pilot cycles. 3 cycles. The first 2 ones, they were funded by GIZ and CAFE, and the third one funded by ABD itself. As you can see, well, there was a huge diversity of actors or institutions that were that took part on the pilot. So first we had Badesul, BDMG, the Bank of Amazonia. In cycle number 2, we had BNDES, Cressol, Fomento Paraná, and the Bank Development Mato Grosso, and then the Development Bank of Nordeste and SESC. So you can notice that this methodology, this pilot cycle, was very important, was really of the essence to us, because we have many diverse institutions covering the whole portfolio. So we have cooperative banks, fostering agencies, state development banks, and federal banks with specific niches within the country. So this is a chance for us to validate up to what extent this methodology was adjusted to the reality of the Brazilian institutions. And from the diversity perspective, we obviously had institutions that were starting out their curve, that were in the very beginning of their trajectory, whilst others were more advanced, that had their processes, governance already matured and ready to deal with the 2030 agenda. And what was the benefit of this methodology? For the starting ones, the methodology allows them to start out in this trajectory, starting this internal discussion on how to prioritize and to integrate the SDGs, thinking on the long and midterm, and also for the advanced institutions. This methodology allows them to, confront their perceptions, to question if their own strategies are working out fine. So we had a rather heterogeneous set of participants in our project. So let me now delve a little bit deeper into the methodology so that you know more about it. And just so you know, this was project devised in 2021 and developed throughout the year of 2022. And in the year of 23, we have a new pilot cycle being set up. We have new institutions engaged in this project. And the idea is to, train and to implement this in as many institutions as possible with our network considered. Talking about the methodology itself, this is a 4-step approach, and the methodology is available in an Excel spreadsheet. So this is a great way to facilitate and make it more accessible to the institutions that go through the implementation of the pilot, and the other institutions that will have further access to this methodology. APD is going to not only, provide them with the methodology, but also with an implementation step by step or an implementation brochure. So the step number 1 is basically the assessment of the relevance of the SDGs for the mandate. The idea about this first step is that the institutions should reflect and to try to prioritize the SDGs. And this is the very first thing that we ask institutions to make, that they should do this exercise and to reflect internally about what are the SDGs which are more relevant to their mandates and how they see themselves as development financial institutions. This was done by the pilot institutions in many different ways. Some of them have brought this to their board, and some others have discussed with the employees. So they've reached this through different strategies. The step number 2 is the contributions for capital allocation. So this methodology takes a snapshot of the portfolio of those institutions and establishes a connection between the products and the SDGs. And this connection, this framing, is basically based on a list of 11 sectors and 61 subsectors. So this is the universe of sectors. So you basically analyze what are the projects, the lines, and you establish this connection. And each one of those sectors and subsectors are obviously connected to either positive or negative contributions in the 17 SDGs. So the idea in the step 2 is for you to convey that development financial institutions to give the snapshot of their capital allocation to the SDGs. To what extent your portfolio is contributing to SDG 2 or 3 or 4 positively and negatively. So we give them this negative and positive assessment vis-a-vis to each SDG. So step number 3 is the acknowledgement of local needs. So that step, we basically carry out an analysis of what are the needs of that area, specifically in the territory, either a region or a set of states or a state specifically. And we run an assessment on what are the SDGs which are more intensely needed. So we did an analysis of how is it that each one of the SDGs were going to be complied with, and then we surveyed like SDG 5 or 6 or 7 for each one of those regions. So that was another step that we could contribute in many different ways. Other pilot institutions, aside to assessing the fulfillment of the SDGs or the completion of the SDGs within their own regions, we've also tried to identify, for instance, what could be done at the level of the state government. So the state government would convey what were their priorities with regards to environmental, social, and economic development. And then we realized what were the local needs. And we finally reached the step number 4, which is the final step, which is the prioritization of the SDGs. In other words, this is the result of the methodology, is sort of, where we want to target. And that basically asks the institutions to reflect about the 3 previous steps 1 to 2. In other words, understanding what were the SDGs that they were considered as priority, and then step 2, what is it that your portfolio demonstrated, and the ones that you've identified as priority and relevant compared to the local needs of the regions that you were acting. So the set of reflections and results will dewater naturally in this step 4, so that it allows us to define the SDGs prioritization that is going to inform their SDG strategy for mid and long term. This is, in a summary, what was expressed in the previous slide, but in a slightly more detailed fashion, we can move forward for the sake of time. Okay, now with regards to the methodology, we always try to understand what the methodology is and what the methodology is not about, so that we can align the expectation with regards to the development. So nowadays, this methodology allows us to do the negative and positive contribution of the SDGs for the portfolio of that institution. So that allows us an initial, a preliminary analysis of what are the positive and negative contributions that that institution can give. And it shows the results vis-a-vis to the SDGs that have been selected as relevant by that financial institution. So it allows you to do comparisons. As I mentioned, you compare results from step 1 to step 2, step 2 to step 3, and that is highly helpful for the internal analysis. So this methodology is not about framing and a tagging of the portfolio operations. This is something that we want to help our members. So we want this methodology to be the baseline so that they can give this first step forward. And in the future, we want to work in a second methodology that is going to work in an ex-ante analysis. So you're going to basically visualize the projects that can be framed into that. Nowadays, this is just an ex-post analysis. It's a snapshot of your members' portfolio, and it basically tells you how is it that you are positioned within the SDGs context. And now, so let me check how I am in terms of time. Sorry, Carlos. I'm just about to close. No, Bruna, thank you so very much. You're perfectly in time. Okay, so here on the results, and actually, Carlos was going to talk to you about the results and the, but this is basically the feedback that ABD got not only from ABNT but from the other 9 institutions. So that was one, way we used to organize the results. So number 1, the generation of robust information that were evidence-based, and we know that they already contribute. This is the mandate of the, developing institutions. However, some of those information are not organized and not systematized in such a way that we can use that in our agenda. And the incorporation of the SDGs and of those reflections can be extremely helpful in strategic planning. Many of the members have realized that they can use this database for the future step, the strengthening of the articulation of this institution with other relevant stakeholders, for instance, the executive power, the executive branch, the legislative, the state, parliament, for instance, or the regulatory agencies and external control. So this is one way of adjusting the narrative of your work, a common narrative, a common language that will basically tell more about your role as a development financial institution. And we also have the prioritization of the SDGs with this communication focused approach. So it's another narrative, especially for the institutions that work with the general public, and and some of them have a duty of accountability. So this is one way of establishing a common language. And with this methodology, we also intend to support our partners in the construction of a monitoring and a follow-up system that is capable of measuring the impact. The IDB colleagues, for instance, have talked about the impact measurement methodology. So this is the stepping stone really for us to be more ambitious and to definitely work with the other impact metrics. And we understand that this methodology allows our institutions to, harness the partnership opportunities. They will have a privileged position in the 2030 communication agenda. So you can establish a contact with international agencies, other stakeholders, multilateral, bilateral institutions that will help them to work more strategically within the 2030 agenda. This is a project that is ongoing. We are going to hold a new cycle 23. And the idea is that this methodology will inform a standardized methodology that each institution will be able to absorb, to the extent of their capabilities. Thank you, Bruna. Thank you. Fantastic. A lot of information with, pretty thick content, but incredible perspectives. And it's great to work with you, ABDE, within the Alliance. And so we are soon going to have BDMG and BDRE, talking a little bit more. And it seems that the processes have been broadened, right? And part of the work that you've started was indeed intensified. But just before that, let's now give the floor to Bancoldex, which is basically the PICS host for 2023. So
Hello, Maria Fernanda Marinke. Thank you very much for being here. The idea is to give the context in Colombia of how this was used there and how alignment was done there. And based on what Bruna has just presented, right? So welcome. Well, thank you, Carlos. I'd like to greet all of my colleagues here. Thank you so much for the invite to be here today. As it was mentioned, we want to show how a development bank can align with financing and public policies to provide concrete tools to the population so that we can finally see the impact, which is our main focus here. Well, here we have the three levels, right? First is global governance. So we have the international agents, the 2030 agenda, and the Paris Agreement with their specific goals. And the question here is how to draw countries so that they can truly have public policies and legislations that can be translated into concrete goals that will later be developed based on instruments and for the banks, financial instruments and non-financial instruments, so that at the end of the day, we can benefit the end users, which in fact live and experience different contexts, considering the different geographies here. So the idea is to develop the different levels here to see what happens, right? Well, when we look at the micro level, global governance, we highlight the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agreement. And we have COP26 here with specific issues to reduce emissions by 51% by 2023. The idea is also to contribute to the global agenda for 2030. We have committed to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 also. So this would be a Colombian goal. And considering this goal, we need to start observing which public policy instruments we start to develop in Colombia. I'd say that starting in 2001, we had some legislation trying to move forward in some of these topics. Now, more recently, in 2018, we had an analysis done for the opportunities Colombia had to invest in this area and also to assess the obstacles. We also assessed which instruments the development banks would need to help that. One of the questions we posed to Colombia, considering the 2030 agenda, is how to start implementing. So we defined the compass based on specific indicators and goals. The indicators actually consider the local levels, because we have to consider that, yes, SDGs are global, but we need to break that down to a more regional level. And we recently have understood that public policy is important to that. And with that, we implemented the Energy Transition Act of 2009, 99, because we understand that governments need to have goals and responsibility. In 2022, we launched the EIGCC with the Culture and the Technology Ministry. And the idea was trying to start understanding how to find common points among industries to work energy efficiency even with small companies. So we faced these goals and tried to find specific paths to reach them. So before we go to the next line, I'd like to say that the there were strategic lines that focused on gender, for example, to try to bridge the gaps between men and women in some sectors. Another point is that the financial system also needs to disclose information and even climate information, and this allows us to understand how to strengthen these sectors internally. As was mentioned by my colleagues, we need tools. We need to identify the strategy, the portfolio, and this will all help the country fulfill their goals. So with these public policy instruments, we started trying to find a level of climatic funding level. And we adopt a line of action based on climate change. And we have already seen this in development banks in Colombia. The first action line is related to the development of economic and financial tools to allow development banks to see the obstacles and to understand what tools they really need. The second is information management. And the biggest obstacle here is to understand the portfolios, what to do to gauge impact, and on the other hand, how to share information, what projects are involved, and what impacts are generated. And finally, building capacity not only in the industry, but also in governments and national development banks. These banks are responsible for this impact, but they also have to strengthen a number of different areas. Prioritization is also another theme. We need to build capacity and design and structure projects based on funding that is associated with resources coming from multilateral banks and the credit processes which are important to be able to join resource generations and make that resources get to the locations where they are actually needed. The Colombian government also assessed this aspect and understands that we need investments of 1.2 to 1.8 of the GDP of 2021 to be able to reach our goals. And that's why it's important for us to have an agreement between the development banks. Now, I'd like to tackle global governance and talk a little bit about the four pillars in Bank LAC's strategies. We have different tools. We have corporate government, sustainable finance. We have green growth that includes biodiversity and sustainability. We have social well-being that includes gender issues, victims of armed conflicts, people with a disability. You also have in the base environmental risks and social risks, and we also need to tackle efficient management, which is slightly more internal. But these are the grounds of our approach. And finally, I'd like to talk about this specific program brought by the Tourism Ministry in support of public policies, and that the project designed the journey of climate change approaches towards fulfilling the SDG. So we have finance and a credit line focused on the corporate sector, focusing on small countries, small and medium companies. The idea was to use circular economy and economic topics and climate change mitigation as our main theme areas there. We do have resources and provide resources for technical support, strengthening in these companies so that they can understand how, by changing their business models, they can affect and mitigate climate change. Then we go to the micro level, the last one, territories. This is when we start understanding resource allocation, and this is where we find the biggest obstacles. This program allowed us to allocate $22 million as resources for small companies in the company. These companies contribute to 99% of the working capital in the country. So we include 33 states in this program. We have 33 states overall, and the program has reached 26 of these. So this program is more capillary now and not just focused on the major capital cities. The idea is for these companies to develop processes that are more sustainable, more energy efficient, and services that are more sustainable. We have projects on solar panels, for instance, and we're right now starting to invest not only for small, but also not only for big, but also small businesses to be more energy efficient. The idea is to foster better use of natural resources, especially water in that case. In conclusion, I'd like to mention that we have come to the conclusion that financial instruments are important, but it's important to focus on local culture as well. We need to understand what people need so that we can have a top to bottom cascading effect, but but something that happens in a positive way. Unfortunately, I've run out of time, but that's what I have to share. Well, thank you so much, Maria Fernanda. That was a very comprehensive presentation, so thank you so much. I'm now thinking about the impact of what's produced by the banks and the territories. So what happens locally with all these projects, right?
So the departments and the implementation of the sustainability strategies. And now we are going to get back to Brazil, and we will check what the people are doing. So Anderson and Cynthia, you are the two last speakers, and we count on you. And I will ask our participants to just hang on for another couple of minutes to listen to your participation, to see what is it you've integrated in your regional banks vis-a-vis to the alignment from the diagnosis until the creation of instruments and tools that will help clients to, how is it that you put it, to improve sustainability and to further support sustainability. So would you like to start for the BRD? Hi, good Anderson, I'm not sure we can hear you well. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? No, we cannot hear you. I'm not sure whether other people. Sorry, there's something. Your audio is really low. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. My apologies. It's all right. No problem, Anderson. This is this is live with technologies like this. So it's my pleasure to be here with you, together with other development colleagues, with the whole Alliance group, and with the supporting team. I'm very glad. I will speak on behalf of the BRD, the Extreme South Development Bank, and we have a long story, 62 years of existence just this year on June the 15th. And the interesting thing is that we are in a slightly more formal alignment process to the Sustainable Development Goals for the last 10 years only. But we have been looking hindsight and trying to observe when is it that we have apprehended the first efforts in order to be aligned and to have our projects or the projects that we were supporting already aligned. So the whole strategy, as it was mentioned by some colleagues, I mean, we actually tried to transform this into a strategy, and we have just consolidated this over the last 10 years, and we have been pursuing it. So obviously, the main challenge is for us to start mapping the portfolio. How is it we can check what we have and align this? And so I brought here a couple of figures, and the BRDE managed to do 400.4 billion reals in operations, over 10,000 contracts. And the characteristic of our activities is that we act in some operations directly and in a couple of others indirectly. And this is something that you develop with your fund transferring partners. And it helps you to establish your partnerships according to each one of those activities. Last year, with all the investments, we managed to accomplish almost 80% of the projects aligned with at least one SDGs. And our region is the South region of Brazil and also in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul. But we have some singularities of our region. It's strong in agribusiness, it's intensely industrialized, and in the graph at the left bottom, you can see that there is a lot of investment considering the not only the supply, food supply, but also the reduction of inequality. And we have here one of the main objectives, which is the generation of employment positions and income. So we end up having this mapped formally, and as of that, of the last 8 years, that has started to render positive results, inserting or basically closing our presence with the multilateral agents and national agents, capturing more resources with the European banks, the World Bank, the CAFE, BID, the Inter-American Development Bank. And now with the BRICS banks, we managed, and a good part of those resources have been allocated because the BRDE managed to demonstrate up to what extent we can work and operationalize things. And how is it that we do this? I mean, our ESG strategy is conceived like this. So step number one is to get to know the portfolio a little better, not only understanding the investment, where is it that the resource is going to be allocated, but understanding who's using those investments and who are the end users, or the ones who are ultimately going to benefit from that investment, where that benefit is going to be deployed or allocated. And this is, with that, we've managed to reinforce our database, and we had to incorporate tools to our systems in order to capture this information that were extremely important. And as of then, we started to deploy a methodology that we call this, it's not exactly a taxonomy, but it's sort of a classification methodology, not only to classify, but also to identify investments and to align them with the SDGs and with the 2030 agenda. And so right after that, in a pretty summarized way, we, based on the Sustainable Development Goals, we've established some priorities, some objectives, and we have here the purposes, and we have these this development and translation of those into the initiatives that BRDE wishes and can support in each one of those regions. And as we look to our portfolio and the investments that we have been supporting, we classified them and we created a list of projects, and siloed per nature. And knowing more about that project, we managed to understand what was the SDG that was impacted and related. And having said that, then we managed to understand how BRDE was able to allocate the funds in the investments in this far south area. So this is a good part of this has had a very positive repercussion to the bank. I mean, managing to have access to external funds that were geared specifically towards other projects of the same nature. And we managed to create a culture in some organizations that had recurrent projects, like, for instance, in clean energy, distribution and generation. We are basically the first choice in terms of financial agents. This is that they come to us first because they already know our ability to analyze projects, to do the adequate resource allocation for that specific type of investment. Has generated by itself some other initiatives. So we, by looking at our portfolio, at the incoming projects, we can basically frame them into specific programs that BRD has put together. Like, for instance, we have the Green Bank program, Banco Verde, and it is slightly broader. It not only covers environmental aspects, but also social aspects. And together with Banco Verde, we have another fund which is called Green Inequity, and those are basically sunk costs funds that we are going to start investing in the environmental issues. And we have other programs that are focused trying to mitigate gender differences, programs that are concentrated on the entrepreneurship, young entrepreneurship, and those programs are starting to get slightly better conditions for them to be developed by the employers. And the other challenge, the additional challenge that was also mentioned, was the metrics, the impact metrics, or the measurement of the impact. So our methodology basically tells us the decision-making part. And once that is done, then we have to be able to measure the impact. So we are now about to implement the SARAS system, which is the social and environmental impact. And we also have the BRDE Labs. It's a startup acceleration program. Just last year, we developed an edition that was focused for practical and technological solutions for ESGs. And large banks and other companies of the south part of Brazil have taken part. And we have launched a couple of challenges, tools that could help us, for instance, with the reduction of CO2 emissions in operational processes, like, for instance, the need to commute from one urban center to the rural areas, and then calculate how much that would impact in terms of the greenhouse gas effect, and so that we could create a compensation chamber of the positive externalities potentially generated by this project, and to monitor climate risk, because this is not obviously just for the sake of the SDGs. This is, literally becoming a formal requirement. All the stakeholders will have to monitor that by close in their portfolios, and the climate risks we have to be able to understand. So those tools will allow us to map and assess the ESG practices, not only for the BRDE, but also relationship network established. So that, in a nutshell, that's basically what BRD has been doing. We have been doing a great effort on establishing this identity of a green bank, a sustainable bank, and we have been developing many different initiatives in order to be able to robusticize our internal culture, tools, mechanisms that we can use in order to improve this process, to not only conceive but also follow up such projects, and to become a conductor or a conducting agent for such projects in the far south region of the country. And once again, thank you very much for the opportunity. Since we were last, we just felt that we needed to speak faster. Now I'm going to give the floor to Cynthia from the BDMG, the Development Bank of Minas Gerais. And I just would like to hear from you, how is it that you measure in terms of quality the impact of this change of BDRE as a green bank? Do you think that was there a different type of interest, new types of clients that were, that started to look for your support because of these new tools that were made available? Yeah, both things happened, both things. Both the clients who were pretty loyal to the BRDE, that have been developing projects that were aligned with the SDGs, and just as I mentioned in the very beginning, the economic matrix of the South is extremely strong. Sorry, Anderson, we cannot hear you.
Não. Sim, agora.
Melhorou?
Sim.
Okay, is it better now? Okay, sorry. I think it's my earbuds. Well, so as I said, we are working both ways, Carlos. We were presented here with projects that our loyal clients were already committed to, and for social and environmental sustainability. So that offered us the possibility to, offer funds with improved payment conditions, and this is something that basically allowed us to have a solid participation in this partnership. And the other movement was to have new clients coming up with sustainability-driven projects and establishing us as their preferred partner for the investment, and acknowledging that. And energy generation has been the field with the greatest number of clients, wind projects, photovoltaic, and a couple of other projects. Now, thank you, and let me give the floor to Cynthia Berschlein from BDMG, the Development Bank of the State of Minas Gerais, right? And your presentation is in English, but you're going to speak Portuguese, am I right?
Exactly, Carlos. Thank you very much for being so patient. You are the last one to be speaking, right? But now we are all ears to hear about the set of instruments that you have created to face the challenge of alignment. Well, Carlos, thank you very much. It's truly challenging to be the last one, but there's also a good silver lining because I've been able to listen to so many people that are so much engaged with international agendas and everything. So I'm very happy to be here today. And my idea is to quickly show you the experience of the Development Bank of Minas Gerais, BDMG, to generate impact based on the sustainable framework that is connected to the SDG. So we and the BRDER relatives, so to speak. So we've been in the country for over 60 years. We are a subnational development bank. And in the state of Minas Gerais, and we work to act to impact the way that our clients develop their business strategies. And the idea is always to connect these practices with good and sustainable practices. We work with both the public and private sectors, and the private sectors with small and medium companies as well. And we also work with the public sector in all the over 800 cities in the state of Minas Gerais. We have close to 30,000 active clients. We are present in 95% of the 802 cities in Minas Gerais. We have a 1.1 default. We had the first issue of the sustainability bond in 2007, and we saw a revolution happen in the financial market here towards sustainable practices. So we have an array of innovative financial solutions. BDMG has published their sustainable tools framework, which gathers part of that portfolio of BDMG with the SDG commitments, and we allow for the issue of bonds to that purpose. The framework specifically for us serves as a management tool. So it allows us to issue bonds, but it also allows us to, it provides us with guidelines for eligibility criteria in sustainable and social projects, and the exclusion list with negative impactors for impact reports. So we had a green bond framework published before, but when we started reviewing the portfolio back in 2019 was to expand it for green projects, but also with social initiatives brought upon by the BMDG. So in the first half of 2020, that's when we started. So in addition to the social, environmental, and climatic categories, we have all of the indicators for each one of the categories. And then in June 2020, we had a second part opinion by Sustainable Analytics. And after that, we had a sign off in the sense that our system is compliant with the international sustainable standards. Now, even though bond issuing is not our core purpose here, we did have the SDG bond issued by the BDMG. I think that's something that we learned a lot was happened when we analyzed our portfolio based on a number of criteria: uh, health, education, gender inclusion, and we came up 11 social, environmental, and climatic categories. And these are connected to 13 of the 17 SDG and to 28 of the 169 targets for SDG. So we were able to classify our area based on these social, environmental, and climatic aspects. So some of the areas are health, education, urbanization, small and micro enterprises, and this is considered financial inclusion for these companies. We also have gender inclusion, as we have specific products for women leading their businesses. And we have also products focused on economic recovery after disasters. And we had dam breaks here in the mining sector in Minas Gerais. As for the environmental and climatic areas, we have approaches in renewable energy, energy efficiency, clean transportation, pollution prevention and control, sustainable agriculture, to name but a few, right? Now, categorizing our portfolio helps us create different thematic categories connected with the social themes and corresponding SDG and SDG goals specifically. Oftentimes we neglect to indicators to know what population was assisted, how many households were connected to an official sewage line, things like that. So it's important to have these indicators. So I mentioned the framework was a management tool for us because it allowed us to have an internal tagging system. So in each financing transaction at the bank today, we need to go through an assessment to see whether social and or environmental benefits are connected to that. So we have system screens that will help operations classify these projects based on the taxonomy that was mentioned here. This goes from social and environmental classification of the type of project, but it goes all the way to the metrics and the indicators that need to be used to classify the operation. In addition to the rating, we also have our carbon calculator, as was mentioned by the BRDE. So here we measure emissions, and this helps us quantify avoidable emissions in each one of the financing projects. So we have dashboards such as this one shown here, related to topics that are associated to our products. So for example, for micro and small businesses and gender inclusion, we know all the resources that was disbursed for that, and in this case, 376 million reais here. We have over 33,000 jobs supported in enterprises in those projects, in companies that are led by women, for instance. Beyond, in addition to other indicators also. Now, in health here on the right, with the amount that we funded, 60 million reais, we had 16 cities that were benefited, including 9 projects in the public sector and 8 projects in the private sector. As for renewable energy and energy efficiency, we see that more energy was generated and more emissions that could lead to the generation of greenhouse effect gases were avoided. Now, the main takeaways are shown in this slide here. So knowing the portfolio in social and environmental terms is essential, and it's the first step. And having data in the company that are related to these criteria is key. If we don't have this data, we cannot just identify some aspects such as gender, for example. So it's essential for us to collect this data and even generate this data. Frameworks in sustainable financing are a tool to issue bonds, but they have to be perceived as management instruments so that we have clearer milestones to what each institution refers to when they talk about social and environmental projects. As we have mentioned here today, formalizing partnerships and technical collaboration is also key to allow us to move forward in a more sustainable way. Thank you so very much. At BDMG, we are always working to improve this experience. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much. I'll switch to English now.
Thank you to all of the speakers. We are almost 15 minutes late. I'd like to thank you, all speakers and all participants to have remained connected. I'd like to ask one
Olha, a pergunta, acho que essa pergunta é a mais difícil de todas, então eu vou dar aqui minhas contribuições. Bom, para a BDE, como é uma instituição que congrega, que representa as subnacionais e as federais, para a gente, o que a gente pensa para um médio e longo prazo é possibilitar que essas ferramentas, de fato, sejam usáveis, utilizáveis pelas nossas instituições, né? Que a gente consiga fazer com que a agenda, de fato, seja internalizada não só pelas altas lideranças, mas também pelo corpo técnico das instituições e que isso passe a ser o dia a dia dessa instituição. Então, a gente tenta trabalhar para as ferramentas serem cada vez mais tropicalizadas, cada vez mais aplicáveis. A gente sabe que muito da metodologia ele vem de fora, então a gente tenta fazer um pouco desse casamento do que vem de fora e da realidade de outros países para a realidade do Brasil, que tem suas idiosincrasias. Então, isso a gente busca fazer na BDE. E outro lado forte da atuação da gente, pensando também no médio e longo prazo, é a agenda de advocacy, né? Acho que é importante que a gente esteja cada vez mais próximo, não apenas do governo federal, mas dos governos estaduais, mostrando a importância dessas instituições, sejam elas subnacionais ou federais, para que o país, ele de fato, ele cumpra ali o seu papel na Agenda 2030. Acho que a gente já se posicionou ali, player estratégico, né? Os bancos e as agências de fomento. Então, talvez seja no sentido de fortalecer o nosso papel de forma mais ampla nas políticas públicas, para que esses bancos e agências possam, de fato, seguir o seu mandato e realizar suas contribuições. Obrigada. E obrigada mais uma vez pelo convite.
Obrigado. Talvez, talvez, Rafael Fonplata.
Sim,
Mais ou menos na linha do que a Bruna falou, eu acho que ao mesmo tempo que seguir consolidando a capacidade da instituição de cada vez mais estar alinhada e contribuindo para as agendas globais, é um trabalho junto aos beneficiários para que cada vez mais os projetos já sejam pensados desde o início com um enfoque nos ODS, com resultados específicos definidos a partir desse ponto de partida. Seria isso.
Perfeito. Edgar.
Bien, gracias por la palabra y a todos los colegas panelistas. He tomado mucho nota, digamos, de las ideas compartidas. Yo, en efecto, concuerdo con Bruna, coincido con la idea de Rafael, es lo que mencionaba en mi presentación. Es un poco el dilema de huevo o la gallina, ¿no? Si hay que crear el instrumento financiero para, digamos, que nuestros clientes toquen nuestras puertas, o si es responsabilidad, digamos, del sector público.
Clients to keep on with fostering those projects and in such a way that we are. Sorry, Edgar, we cannot hear you well. Sorry, thank you, guys. So as I was saying, we have to basically work on both fronts, not only on the financial development, but in harnessing those competencies for the sovereign institutions and the private sector, and from the great challenge of the financial development community to fund the development is a bit of that the fashion of the MRV has just passed by too quickly. And now we know that the green funds, ESG, taxonomy, TCFD, and all that, because then this, from the strategic perspective, we cannot forget the measurement of the impact, the impact metrics. And this is something that I was really pleased with the BDMG presentation, and this is a very important report that we do, and so that we can have more approvals, and especially if we are not necessarily formalizing a contract or a disbursement. So our homework is indeed to resume the impact measurement agenda from after those strategic alignments. Thank you. And maybe we could align and continue with Maria Fernanda. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you. Yeah, I would add two things. One is to continue with the internal strengthening of the institutions and to keep on serving the information for the impact management, which is very important. And this is a process that is very innovative, and we have to just, use more technologies to follow up the companies. This is very, very important. That should be done in the next coming months. Second thing is to have this very strong alignment, making sure that the development banks are aligned with public policies. And among the banks, we obviously have to just look for the synergy and to basically generate complementarity so that we generate impacts which are complementary to one another. And last but not least, developing products that are focused in some of the non-financial topics and trying to knock down important barriers, like, for instance, the ESGs and so on. So I think that those would be the three elements that we have an important work to be developed throughout the next months. Thank you. Thank you, Maria Fernanda. Maybe Anderson now? Sorry, Anderson, your audio. Any better now? Okay. Well, I agree with Bruno's perspective. The ABDE's role in trying to just, make this, visible to all of us. And we have some other institutions that do not have the technical ability to do that. So ABDE's role is very important, to centralize, to congregate, and also becoming an experience exchange forum among the development agents. This is a great challenge, not a small one at all. In particular, if we acknowledge Brazil, Brazil is huge from the geographical perspective, and we have to have many different development agents, each one working in different extremes, and we would have to, our activities in such a way that we could concentrate our efforts in different SDGs. Obviously, we will never be able to, just work with all of them, so that we, instead of correcting, we could create even more distortions among those regions. So this is the risk in countries that are geographically so extensive. And so that's why I think we would need to have, a perspective such as the ABDE, and to standardize activities in such a way that we might be, more balanced in our ESG practices. Thank you, Anderson. Maybe Cynthia now?
Maybe Cynthia, and then Marie will close. Okay. Well, I think we've heard quite interesting and important things here. I'd like to add that maybe we can create a collective and or a similar framework shared by different development institutions. We see shared actions here, a shared interest here in carbon neutrality and energy efficiency. So maybe that will be possible in the future. I'd also like to highlight a journey towards a specific focus on climate. I believe that our institutions need to move forward to try and work on the portfolio footprint, carbon footprint. We need to start being able to measure that and mitigate that and create decarbonization goals for our portfolios. I believe that this is incipient, but it's possible in the years to come. Not only it is possible, it is something that we need to do. Thank you. Enrique, would you like to take the floor now, please? Yes, sure. Sorry, I don't speak Portuguese, and most of you do, so I apologize for that. I'd like to make a remark, and I'd like to apologize on behalf of my colleague who had to step out. He had another meeting. The tools that were shown here today, they stem from the IDF strategies to be aligned with the Paris Agreement, so that, and in order to do that, their clients need also to be aligned with. So the tools that were shown here today, in addition to others that weren't, are available for public development banks or subnational banks, rather national ones. And the objective is for these banks to use these tools as they provide financing. So as much as possible, if these institutions can be in line with the Paris Agreement, that would be desirable. This is work that started a long time ago, so there are other tools other than the ones that were shown today. So we have tools to mitigate social risks and things like that. But now we are moving towards a time in which each bank is going to be assessing their portfolios to know what they need to do to be aligned with the SDGs and the Paris Agreement objectives. So these are just a few remarks I'd like to make, but we are ready to support any of the banks and any stakeholder that requires report in the region.
From part of the members and other partners like SDBs. What do you think, Marie?
Yeah, thank you very much, Carlos. It was a very interesting webinar, and I thank you for that. I think we heard some challenges. We heard some success factors that really echo what IDFC members showed during our work on SDG alignment. And as I was mentioning, so we've seen some initiatives, some methodologies that have been developed, and as we are within IDFC building this concrete element of implementation on SDG alignment, really this is a call to pursue the dialogue between all of us in order to share this methodology, this framework that we all are working on. And because I think there is the need to embark the wider finance community in the same journey. So I will be very pleased to have further contacts with all of you, dear colleagues.
Thank you so much, Marie. I guess the Alliance will make sure that we bring everyone together and maybe create a working group to accelerate the implementation and dissemination in the different countries of the region. So I guess we will have further conversation especially with the brokers like ABDE in Brazil to make sure that we have these kind of institutions together with the MDBs like BEAD, like CAF, like Fomplata, who can really support the other levels of action in the development banking. Thank you again for your time. See you very soon and enjoy your day. Lunch for Latin America and our evening for Europe. Thank you so much.
Many thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oui, allô?